Hello, this is the second presentation of Amoris Laetitia, and I would like to talking about a little bit more of the context in which this document was written. As we all know, the text is written within the Jubilee year of mercy, and Pope Francis wishes that our approach to family is guided by the spiritual attitude of mercy. We read in number 5, this exhortation is especially timely in this Jubilee year of mercy. It seeks to encourage everyone to be a sign of mercy and closeness wherever family life remains imperfect or lacks peace and joy. This is the most important invitation that we have received. The most important of God's attributes is mercy. I think that in a secularized society like New Zealand, in which God is not obviously present in society, we should look with merciful eyes at all the situations. The single woman taking care of their children, the broken families, and the people who are afraid of getting married or having any serious commitment. The most important act is to show our compassion, mercy and love. But at the same time, we must look with mercy on our own families. We also have problems, frailties, incomprehension, lack of communication and ruptures. Our life within the family needs to be based on a love that becomes mercy, that accounts for our personal weaknesses and the weaknesses of those besides us. We are called to be a sign of mercy wherever the family remains imperfect. So Francis is conscious that so many families are living in precarious situations and we must show our closeness. It is a change of perspective. So let's now talk about two important principles for reading Amoris Laetitia. The first principle that Pope Francis uses to understand his ideas is time is greater than space. In all his encyclicals and in the letter Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis invites us to live by the principle time is greater than the space. What is he trying to affirm with this principle? How does he connect this principle with the reality of families? We must not read this principle in a scientific way. Also, he's not using time and space as philosophical terms. He's just using them as symbols, images, metaphors. The ecclesiological view of Pope Francis is to understand the Church as people of God. The image for the Church as people of God underlines two important values for Francis. First, the historicity of the Church, a pilgrim church that walks towards the kingdom of God, and the second value of the communion between all the members of the Church, hierarchy, lay people, religious people, in which all of us, we participate in the common priesthood of Jesus. He wants to eliminate any careerism or sense of superiority from the hierarchy. With his ecclesiology now, we can understand better why he considers time dominant over space. For Pope Francis, time means the process that is needed in life for growing and developing. Also, it means the salvation, because our salvation has been acted in history, in a concrete history, when Jesus became human being and entered history seeking the salvation for each person. Space, on the other hand, symbolizes for the Pope limits, a static dimension in which we can control reality and experiences, while time we cannot control because we will never know, we cannot control the future, we cannot control the past. When we have a space like an acre, we are able to control it, to manipulate it. So he compares this priority of space over time to those people within the Church that search power and search to occupy spaces. When he applies this principle, to the reality of the families, he's giving us the message that time is needed to assimilate the truth of Jesus. We must give time to ourselves and to the others, instead of searching for immediate results. Results that clearly occupy spaces. Sometimes we Catholics feel impotent when no one listens to us. We don't see a Christian culture and no one follows the gospel. One of my students, a father with 2 adolescent boys, commented in class that when he talks about faith, no one in his family listens to him. He felt frustrated. And here comes the principle of Pope Francis for family. It seems that it has its origins in an important Jesuit like Peter Fabro, when Fabro affirmed, "For being mature and free, we need time and lots of patience, because time is the messenger of God." Another important influence of this idea about time and space comes from Ignacio Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. He affirmed, "Do not let yourself be restricted by the biggest space, but you have to be capable of being in a very little space." Magnanimity, or loving with generosity, is making a virtue of the big things as well as the small things. Magnanimity is not just doing lots of things or reaching many people with our love, but it's also giving all our heart into a little situation. Jesus diminished his space. He made himself smaller, poorer, less king-like, less regal. He entered the suffering and the limits of the people. And this is our path as Christians. This is sometimes I have discovered in my own life. When I was young, I was very passionate. I continue being passionate, but I was more passionate than before. And I was always thinking of going to proclaim the gospel. I evangelized in the United States, in Italy, in different cities of South America, and I wanted to get to China and Japan. I understood evangelization as conquering spaces for Jesus. I do not think that it was wrong, but in some ways I believe that in the past I only wanted results and fruits, results that occupied spaces. Thinking about that the other day, I was wondering if I had lost my enthusiasm. But then I realized that I had changed my point of view. My passion for evangelization continues. It is just that life has taught me that to help people and families, we need to accompany them in all the process. To do that, time is needed. We must give the people around us what they need in each moment, trying to help them in their progression towards the truth and Jesus. For example, someone who is very damaged may only be able to assimilate one of our smiles. Perhaps others are able to receive a gesture from us or words of consolation, or someone may want more, and they may be willing to talk about God. Those little acts, though they may seem small, actually open pathways that can lead to an encounter with God. So there is the primacy in the Pope of the journey to follow. That is why he's not so interested in conquering spaces, in immediate results, but to be patient with people and help them to get there, to the ideal that we want. The Church needs to open new paths and not to be worried about occupying spaces. The other day, a friend of mine told me something. I like Catholics because you are not so worried to get to the masses, but you are worried to enter into the mystery. It's a little bit more about that. If we talk about paths, we need to think of ways in which we can change from sin to grace. But this is not a magical path. It needs time. Time is more important than space. The process is more important than an automatic response. The graduality of the pastoral life over the logical consequences. And the other big principle, important principle that Pope Francis adds is that reality is more important than ideas. When he says that reality or people are more important than ideas, he's giving us a key to understand what truth Jesus represents. Jesus is not an idea. Is not an abstract value. Jesus is a person. To encounter the truth means to have a personal encounter with Jesus, in which the truth becomes flesh in our lives. We're not talking about a scientific truth. For us, truth is a relationship. God is relation. So, live the truth is a calling and a vocation for us. It's not just subjective, but it can only become reality in a personal path. In an interview with Padre Spadaro, Pope Francis answers what is the truth for him. Now, he says the Pope, the truth, according to Christian belief, is God's love for us in Jesus Christ. So the truth is a relationship. Each of us grasps the truth and expresses it from themselves, from their history and culture, from their situation in which each one lives. This does not mean that the truth is variable and subjective, far from it, but it means that it is given to us only as a journey and life. Jesus himself said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In other words, the truth is ultimately one with love. It requires humility and opening to be accepted and expressed. So, let's put an example of what the Pope is trying to say here. If I have a friend that is a womanizer, who is afraid of committing himself and doesn't understand the value of marriage, I will not try to convince him with ideas about the importance of getting married and having family. First of all, I will try to support him in the first step of his own emotional maturity, because the processes can take their entire life. So, in that moment, I am not, the reality of that person is more important than the idea. Yes, we know the idea. We know that the ideal is that a person get married to another and have a family forever and till the end of their lives. That is our idea. But I have to be, for me, it has to be more important the reality of that person and give to each person what the person needs. The Pope challenges us in how we have presented it now the values of marriage. He affirms in number 35, it is true that there is no sense in simply decrying present-day evils, as if this could change things, nor it is helpful to try to impose rules by sheer authority. What we need is a more responsible and generous effort to present the reasons and motivations for choosing marriage and a family, and in this way to help men and women better to respond to the grace of God. It seems that the Pope is searching for a new approach, an approach that is less authoritarian and less focused on rules. The old style of evangelization, decrying evil in all its guises, does not help the modern world. Before, the Church had a more juridical idea of marriage. He says in number 36, we also need to be humble and realistic, acknowledging that at times the way we present our Christian beliefs and treat other people has helped contribute to today's problematic situation. We need a healthy dose of self-criticism. We often present marriage in such a way that its unitive meaning, its call to grow in love, and its ideal of mutual assistance are overshadowed by an almost exclusive insistence on the duty of procreation. Nor have we always provided solid guidance to young married couples, understanding their timetables, their way of thinking, and their concrete concerns. At times, we have also proposed a far too abstract and almost artificial theological idea of marriage, far removed from the concrete situations and practical possibilities of real families. This excessive idealization, especially when we have failed to inspire trust in God's grace, has not helped to make marriage more desirable and attractive, but quite the opposite. He asks us to leave behind our idealistic vision of marriage. It is not that we have lost our ideas. It is just that we live in a very complex world. Of course, our idea is the family, but life presents us a woman without a husband, a remarried man with 3 children, a single pregnant adolescent, traffic of young girls in prostitution. What are we going to do with these people, with these concrete people? Pope Francis asks us that when we are in contact with people in our mission, we have to be more concerned with the reality of the person. If I meet a girl, woman with 3 children, I would be careful not to bring up the subject of married life and the importance of a husband, because that's not her situation in that moment. I would be uncaring and unthinking to do so. First, I will try to support her and her kids, trying to help her. So then, afterwards, I will, in that way, that truth is not like a bullet that we shoot at someone. It is a gentle way in which the truth can help and build. As Christians, of course, we have ideals, and we live by them. But to preach these ideals to others can sometimes hide an aggression. We can hide with this preaching our superiority and aggression about those who we think don't reach our standards. So we have to be careful. If I meet a girl who is 16 years old and pregnant, I will not judge her, and I will not start talking about the evils of premarital sex. Of course, I need first to support her in that moment of her pregnancy, and help her as a young adult who needs education. And of course, if I have little children and adolescents, I will present them the values and ideas of marriage and family. So we have to understand what the concrete person needs in each moment. That's very, very important. These are the 2 principles that Pope Francis asks us to follow.